Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to episode 322 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is Jackson. Glad to be with you. If this is your first time on the podcast with us, we're glad to have you here. We try to bring you up to date every week on everything that's going on in the bar exam world. And we offer these podcasts in a couple of different formats. You can watch the video version by going to celebrationbarreview.com/322. That's the episode number. Or you can listen to the podcast using whatever podcast software that you like, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, radio.com, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe. That way you won't miss out on any of the information. Over the past few months, as we've been dealing with the COVID pandemic, we have offered a special free training webinar called Now is the Best Time to Take Your Bar Exam, Why You Should Ignore the Crowds and the Fear. And I don't think that the message that's in that free training webinar has ever been more important or more relevant than it is right now. As we are beginning to turn the corner into the fall 2020 exams, something we never thought we'd ever be talking about, but tests in September and October around the country. In fact, the majority of bar takers in 2020 will take their exams in this upcoming period. We know that there's an enormous amount of uncertainty about the bar exam, and we expect that uncertainty will last into 2021. How do you deal with all that? How do you cope with it? What's the strategy you should use? How should you prepare for the exam? Should you sit it out and wait on the sidelines? We're going to answer all those questions for you and more in this free special training. And to register, all you have to do is click on the button in the show notes or the link in the show notes, and you can register for the next upcoming version of this free training webinar. At the end of each webinar, I do a live Q&A to answer any questions that you might have about your particular jurisdiction or about the strategy that we're suggesting. Since we first introduced this webinar, we've had thousands of people go through it, and it's been incredibly well received. And I encourage you to hop on with us. It's about an hour or so of material, and then we do the 15-minute Q&A. So encourage you to join us. Just click on the link. If you want more information, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/now. Megan is going to be joining me in a minute. We're going to break down the events of the last week in the bar exam, and it was quite a week again. The big news, of course, came out of Florida, where just a few days before the test was scheduled to be administered, it was suddenly canceled in what we're calling the Sunday surrender. And we'll break all of that down and tell you what happened and what we expect is going to happen. So stick around for that discussion. Now, just shortly after we finished recording this episode, the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court posted a video that he described as a video apology to bar applicants in Florida. And frankly, I thought it ranked among the best hostage videos I've ever seen. It was a 5-minute video in which he said, maybe we haven't done a very good job here, and maybe we haven't communicated very well, and maybe this is not working out very well. I would say that the hubris and the arrogance of the Florida bar continue to be extraordinary. And this is not something new. This has happened for literally decades in Florida. Nonetheless, after watching that video, it absolutely said nothing about what's going to happen. It didn't give us any more details or dates, didn't really tell us anything at all. So I wanted to just update you to let you know that there was this video posted, and no, it doesn't really mean much. So unfortunately, that's the status in Florida, and we'll see what happens over the next week or two, and certainly we'll keep you informed here on the podcast. If you were a Florida bar taker, take a deep breath. We're going to gear up again and head back into the studies. If you're taking your exams in September, you should be well into it now. And if you're taking the October 5th and 6th Plan B exams somewhere around the country, then you should be getting underway as well. All right, I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. It has been a wild and crazy week in the bar, and we think there's more of that ahead still. So my co-host, Megan Saya, joined me, and we broke it all down. Let's jump into that conversation. Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Wednesday, August 19th. That sounds weird, doesn't it, Megan?
It does, especially that we haven't really had a major bar exam happen yet. Feels a little weird.
There's got to be some analog for this, but I don't know what it is or precedence. So anyway, welcome, Megan. All right, today was the day that we were supposed to be watching people take the one-day online Florida bar exam. That didn't happen, though, did it?
Nope, it did not. So I'm in California, and so that means we're 3 hours earlier. So on Sunday evening, I got the news, and I think, Jackson, you were probably already asleep in Florida. Probably many of you were already asleep when the news came down that they were canceling the Wednesday exam and going to hope for an October exam date yet to be determined.
Yeah, I guess we could call it, I called it the Sunday surrender. And so there's a couple of things that I want to just point out. And I know many of you are not Florida bar takers, and you're like, well, what do I care? I think this has implications around the country. Florida's a big jurisdiction, and what they're doing, I think, is a bellwether for a lot of what we're going to see. The quick background is that Florida was one of a handful of states that contracted with a company called ILG to do their online test administration and proctoring. ILG is a very small company that was not set up for big proctoring kinds of situations. And ILG was already set to work with Indiana, Nevada, I'm forgetting somebody else, several other states, and it wasn't going well. It run some tests in those states, not actual bar exams, but trial runs that didn't work. And so state after state that was contracted with ILG said, we're going to go to an email exam or an open book exam. In effect, we're just giving up on ILG. Florida continued to say up until Sunday night, oh no, we can do it. We're going to be fine, even though they had had some horrible foul ups last week with software mistakes and people's computers getting hacked. And I don't even want to go down the parade of horrible stuff with bad. In any event, the Florida bar examiners, as of last Friday, were saying, nope, we're still good. We're going to run a trial run on Monday morning, and we're going to give the exam on Wednesday. They even had their proctor training going on. They were doing all of that. And then, as Megan said, late Sunday night, the examiners sent out an email saying, whoops, our bad. I guess we're not going to give an exam on August 19th. And we'll give an exam sometime in October. Really? What date? October 5th and 6th, October 15th, October 31st? Is it the October surprise we've been thinking about? I don't know. In any event, the examiners then said, we're going to keep the content of the test the same. And I think this is really important to understand. I've been reading a lot in the last couple of days of people hypothesizing that Florida is going to join the Plan B on the 5th and 6th. That is not happening. That is just bad, wrong information. I want to cut that right off at the knees. Florida bar examiners in their letter said it will be the same content that we were going to give on the 19th. And that was a one-day Florida-based exam for multiple choice, we think, and multi-state potentially on the essays. But they are not using the 100 questions of the NCBE. Now, what's your take on that? If they're not using the NCBE, does that mean they're going to go on October 5th and 6th anyway, or do you think they'll wait?
My guess, I had to hazard a guess, would be that they will wait until after October 5th and 6th to see how that online exam goes. That day, there will be thousands and thousands of bar takers across the country, all doing live proctoring and all these things simultaneously. And we've just never seen anything like that before. When California did the baby bar live with the live proctoring, it was, a handful of students and that was it. And so my guess would be that Florida would like to see how this all goes down October 5th and 6th before they end up trying again and having to cancel or rework it yet again. But,
yeah, and I don't know when they'll announce the date. I don't think they can wait till after October 5th and 6th to announce the date. But if I'm guessing October 15th or something like that, and I don't even know what day of the week that is, but middle of October is what I think they might be doing. That's one part of all of this. Then another part was that the examiner said, if you didn't want to take this October exam, you could transfer back into the February of 2021, whenever that exam is. And let's be clear, I think you and I have been saying for some time, February is not going to look remarkably different than 2020. And so who knows what that'll be. Now, we had further hypothesized that if the examiners were going to try and give the test in Florida this week, it would have been open book. Still getting a lot of questions about whether or not we think it might be an open book exam if they went to October. I think that there's some possibility of that, depending on what happens with ILG. I don't quite understand why the examiners won't just give that up and go with ExamSoft, but nonetheless, I think if they are forced to use ILG, I think there's still a real possibility for an open book. You recall, you and I talked about the possibility, the high likelihood of cheating on the exam, the way they'd structured it, unlimited comfort breaks, and then some very vague rules for the proctors about, somebody gets up too often or they look around the room too much. I mean, very subjective. And I thought it was not fair to the proctors really in a lot of cases. So is it possible that we could be looking at an open book exam? Yes, I think it is possible. Should you prepare for an open book exam? Well, in our course, I think you should be using mind maps. We're going to talk a lot about those today. We've got a lot of questions. And I think that's one of the ways that you prepare for an open book exam. Now, we have open book exams already scheduled for Georgia, the other big state that an open book, October 5th and 6th. So I think if you're in one of those two states, you want to be working under that presumption. And I know we got some questions this week about would California go to open book? No, I don't see any possibility of that right now. And I don't see any possibility in Texas, and I don't see any possibility in the UBE whatsoever. Plan B tests on October 5th and 6th will not be open book, people that are in the NCBE part. The last piece of the Florida situation I think we need to touch on is diploma privilege, but it's not really that. What Florida's got is a training program. Basically, it says if you're a first-time taker and you haven't taken the bar exam, they're looking at the possibility of letting you practice under the supervision of a Florida attorney from mid-September until the February 21 exams, at which point you would have to take and pass the exam. And again, we got some questions this week from people saying, well, will I be able to do this? I'm a repeat bar taker. The answer to that is absolutely not. I see no scenario in which the Florida bar examiners are going to let repeat bar takers practice, even for a limited period of time. So this would only be a first-time taker. Do you see it that way too? Was that your reading?
Yeah, definitely. I think that if you have failed the exam, you graduated from law school time before 2018 at the most lenient, there's just no situation in which any practice waivers are going to apply to you in any jurisdiction. They're just not giving those to people.
Yeah. And I think there's a bigger question. I mean, you following Joe Patrice on Above the Law and some other folks who've been writing a lot about why do we give a bar exam and is it fair and shouldn't everybody get diploma privilege? Those are all really interesting theoretical questions because in the real world, the bar just isn't going to open up to everybody. They're not going to allow everyone to come in with a bar exam. But some people say, well, you say that because you got a bar review. Yeah, we got a bar review because there's a bar exam and there's going to be a bar exam. And if you're a repeat bar taker, there's going to be a bar exam. And so I think it's a distraction for a lot of people that probably gets in the way of really taking steps forward, don't you? That they get caught up in all that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people who just graduated from law school in May that are fighting these fights. Let them fight those fights. Just not helpful for, I think, any of our students. Not really impacted by these fights. And I would so much prefer you to allow other people to, forward there and you keep studying. Great. Wow. Maybe if something happens and you don't have to take the bar exam, that's amazing. But 99.9% certain that that's going to be the case for repeat bar takers. It just hasn't been as of yet. In this crazy year, we just haven't seen that happen. So keep studying. Definitely.
And it's also not going to apply to people that took the bar 10, 15, 20 years ago, whether you passed or didn't, or you're licensed somewhere else or you're not. I mean, you're just not going to that world. And so I think that I get frustrated because I get a lot of emails and texts and messages from people at posts that want to talk about this. It's like a student in our course, if you've been a follower of us on our podcast, you are almost certainly not in that position to take advantage of diploma privilege. To those people. And I hope that they get that, because it opens up a lot more seats for the students that we've got. And I think we'll get a lot more people through the bar. So I think that's where we stand right now in Florida. The last thing I want to say to our Florida students is, as recommended to you, take a couple of days off, just stop your studying for right now, for a day or two. Now, I'm not saying stop your studying for a month, But for a day or two, take a break. This is when you would have been taking the exam, and many of you may have made plans for the rest of this week after the exam. And that's all good. Stay with all of that. Next week, start back into your studies with a primary focus on reading the lectures, the mind maps. If you're a photo reader, definitely keep photo reading, and work mostly on your mind maps. I would do very little question practice next couple of weeks. This is, and you and I were talking about this before we went live today, this is the longest extended streak of study that I've ever had students go through, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, bar, it's just not, not really made for this kind of marathon type studying. I mean, if you treat it like a marathon and you go slow and steady, but what a lot of people do is, you have concentrated amount of time and you sprint. And unfortunately with the Florida students, you were at the sprint phase, right? Like you were at the end. So even if you've been treating it like a marathon and you've just been one foot in front of the other, you were at the point now where you were just going full tilt because you were prepping for, final push. And so that's where it's very frustrating for you. And we're so sorry that they waited so long to cancel this exam, because it just got you all prepared and ready emotionally and mentally, and then just like door shut. So now, want you to burn yourselves out. You cannot sustain the pace you were at before. You can't sustain that into October. So please don't try. Time for yourself. And then when you start back up again, you want to remember you have a long time till October. We don't even know when in October it's going to be. We have a long time till October. So you need to go back to the slow and steady. And we're just so sorry that you've been put in this position.
Yeah. And I guess kudos to you, Megan. You called it. You said that the winners weren't going to give this test. I don't think this was a surprise to our students quite the way it was the way that I'm reading around the country. I thought ours were well prepared for the possibility of this happening. That doesn't lessen the disappointment, certainly. But hope you that it was a real possibility, and now we'll recenter. But I guess what I would say to our students is take a breath. Let us take a breath. Let us try and figure out where we go with all of this, and don't be headlong. Oh my God, I got to jump in and start writing a bunch of essays every day or doing a lot of multiple choice questions. I think it's too early for that, because you are all prepared to take an exam. It's not like we waved off a month before the exam. We waved off at the very last second. That's unprecedented.
Yeah.
So trying to our way across here and figure out what the best methodology is. Let us guide you through that. It doesn't happen any more effectively by you asking me, is it time? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We're not there yet. And we're going to try and figure this out. And so that we're in uncharted territory, and we're going to have to try and figure that out. And I know we got a lot of questions about Florida to talk about. So do you want to segue over to some of those?
Yeah. So in the chat box, got a question, I think said, are there any concerns with ExamSoft? So the answer is yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michigan used ExamSoft for their July exam, and so we're supposed to go onto the website and get a password, which is they did the baby bar. So you log onto the website and it gives you a password, and then you put that in the software program, and it gives you your essay, and then and your wins on and all that, and it kind of goes in. Well, they got hacked. ExamSoft got hacked, and so people were unable to get the passcodes. And so, of course, they flooded ExamSoft's phone lines. ExamSoft wasn't picking up. They ended up just emailing out to everyone one passcode for each of the test, and just had them put it in and take the test basically the same way, kind of like do it at the actual in-person exam, except you did put in a passcode, but then you have everything and you're just kind of taking it away. So yes, that's, ExamSoft says no personal information was taken. We know if the people who hacked were trying to get some kind of monetary thing. We don't know if they were trying to disrupt the bar exam, whether that was their primary focus or not. It was pretty jarring for the students to then have to take an exam after you're very frazzled and stressed out and dealing with all that, and not knowing if you're the only person who can't get the password. Because remember, the difficulty with this is you're by yourself. So you don't know that every other examinee is having the same problem as you. You panic and think, I can't get into the test. All my studying was for nothing. So eyes on it. It is a long way till October. So our hope is that by the time we get there, ExamSoft has beefed up their security and figured out where they were vulnerable. But there are some issues with ExamSoft as well.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
All right, what else?
Yeah. What I recommend in terms of requesting attendance for the Florida exam moving forward?
Well, I think this is one of those situations where I would just say for right now, just say, go do your photo reading. If you're a photo reader, go through lectures. We've got the interactive versions of the lectures, so you can drill down a little bit deeper into subjects and then start mind mapping. If you haven't started, now you've got an opportunity to do that. If you've been mind mapping, continue to do that in more detail. And hold off on writing and practice questions. If you're in
one last Florida question. In your video assessing possible topics for the August Florida bar exam, you stated that FBE have removed federal civil procedure and jurisdiction from the Florida exam. Is this true for the February 2021 exam as well, or is it only for the August 2020 exam?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is federal civil procedure and jurisdiction is only tested as a multi-state MBE topic. It is not tested on the Florida day of the exam. In other words, it's not part of the Florida multiple choice because that's Florida civil and criminal procedure. And it's not tested in essay format. So for the test that was going to be given in August, that was only day one of the exam. So there was no federal civil procedure and jurisdiction. We would presume right now that a February 21 Florida bar exam would be a 2-day traditional bar exam. Day one, Florida, day two, the multi-state. Therefore, Florida or federal procedure and jurisdiction will certainly be on the MBE and study it. So what I want to tell all of our 2021 students, Florida or anywhere else, follow your study guide. That is geared for the traditional 2-day test, and you should be following that absolutely. Do not omit anything. If we see something that needs to be omitted, we will tell you, but right now there isn't anything anywhere. Probably the best advice we can give. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. As we have to go forward assuming that February 2021 will be a normal exam in terms of the subjects and the format, even if it's online. But we are very aware that it will likely see some changes. But what we don't want you to do is not study something, making an assumption about what is or isn't going to be on the exam, and then it is. We'll say for pretty much every other jurisdiction, everything is still testable that's normally testable. That's one tiny change in Florida only. So like, for instance, you're in California and you're taking October 5th and 6th, you need to study federal civil procedure. Like, don't cut it out. So jurisdiction, they're still testing. Every single subject is still on the table. And that's only one subject in Florida that they've said is not going to be on this exam.
The only new changes in other jurisdictions that I can think of is that Georgia's gone to a 30-minute essay instead of 45 minutes, but still the same subjects are testable. And in the jurisdictions that are giving, obviously, Plan B, they're doing 100 questions of the multi-state of 3 essays, for example. And then in Texas, we've got essays versus the 12 essays, but again, on the same subject matter. So none of that changes in terms of subject matter.
Yeah, exactly. Good question. Okay, so next I want to talk a little bit about New York Reciprocity. So we've been waiting a long time to hear from New York about if they were going to accept any scores from other states. So this would be because New York was so difficult to get into first when they were doing the in-person exam. Then they made it even more difficult, arguably, to get in on the online exam, which is insane because no other jurisdiction who's online is being this restrictive about who can take it because there's no large gathering concerns. But New York has chosen to be very restrictive. So we've been waiting because a lot of people who want to practice in New York have had to leave the jurisdiction for this exam. So they are taking it in, let's say, New Jersey, and hope to have reciprocity and be able to waive into New York. So unfortunately, New York's examiners came up with an incredibly restrictive reciprocity situation. So I'm just going to quickly kind of say we're different candidates, they call them, that are eligible here. So graduated from an ABA approved law school with a JD and you've never sat for any bar exam in the US, then you can have reciprocity. If you are foreign educated, but you graduated from an ABA approved law school with an LLM and you have not sat for any bar exam in the US, The third one is anyone who graduated in 2018 with a JD from an ABA approved law school, and you've sat for one UBE administration, but not for any other bar. So it's like if you sat California twice and then you sat for a UBE, you can't do only if you sat for one UBE. And then the fourth one is any candidate who graduated in 2019 or later with a JD from an ABA approved law school who has taken the UBE and failed no more than twice. So basically, if you graduated in 2019 and took both of the tests that you could have taken then the summer and then the February of this year, and you failed those two, you can still get reciprocity for this one. So incredibly restrictive reciprocity rules.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remind people of what we mean by reciprocity versus a score portability. Reciprocity is this sort of thing that you dust off the shelves from years and years ago, along with Diploma Privilege, that said if you get a passing score in your jurisdiction, whatever it might be, if that state has reciprocity with, state one, reciprocity with state two, then you can waive into state two, regardless of what their passing score might have been. It's just you're in. So what New York has done is that in terms of who they're allowing to sit for the exam in 2020, they've got these restrictions, which are very much like what you just described, Megan. And then because I think they recognized that there might be applicants who weren't going to be permitted to sit for the New York exam, they started realizing, well, if we sign reciprocity agreements with these other states, maybe some of those applicants will go to those other states, take their exams, and they'll come in the back door into New York. And so then they wrote this equally restrictive reciprocity agreement. Now, in general, when we've seen reciprocity in this season, like Illinois reciprocity last week, they didn't put any restrictions on it. It's just, we've got a agreement with Maryland. If you pass the Maryland bar, you can waive into Illinois. Well, what New York is, well, if you pass the Maryland bar, maybe you can waive into New York if you meet our criteria, and this criteria continues to be limited. So in effect, what New York is doing is that they are creating a de facto limitation on the number of times you can take the exam in New York. Whether that will survive into the UBE in 2021, I don't know, but I would certainly say right now it looks like it. Because if you were going to restrict people in an online test, where, as you said, Megan, there's no capacity problem, then why in the world, I think the same thing when they get back to, at some point in 2021, a traditional bar exam, right? So this is bad news. I don't think there's any nice way to say it. If you're a foreign trained attorney, if you're a foreign attorney with an LLM in the US and you're in one of these reciprocity states, which ones of those are going to let you take their exam, by the way? Hardly any of them. And then we'll deign to let you into the New York bar. So there is clearly something afoot going on here. We called this out, a month ago when New York first announced it. It's bad. And there is still no justification that's been announced. Have you read anything, seen anything from the examiners?
No, they're just silent about it.
Yeah, it's just to be a kind of a, this gives us political cover or we can do this in the middle of night while everybody's looking the other way. And it may have been something that they wanted to do for a while, and now they've suddenly got the opportunity to do it. We're going to continue to talk about it and continue to try and put some attention on it. And I think once the chaos around this fall season begins to subside, whenever that happens, I think the attention is going to turn back to New York, and they're going to be under a white hot light to explain what it is they're doing. Now, I think what that means, if you're a foreign trained attorney, is that you should certainly try to apply for the exam in New York, but you should start looking at other jurisdictions, whether they're UBE or not, to the exam, because I think there's less and less of an assurance that you're going to be able to do that. And if you're a foreign trained attorney without an LLM in the US, I think you absolutely need to start looking at a plan B for yourself, because I think there are just fewer options out there. If you're a repeat bar taker, it may start looking at the uniform bar exam in other jurisdictions and considering the possibility that you may not be able to get admitted to New York. I mean, that just may be the reality here.
Yeah, it's rough. We'll keep you guys updated. All right, California, they announced kind of an odd announcement this week. So they have said something that a lot of jurisdictions have said, which is if you're sitting for the October 5th and 6th exam in California, you can't sit for any other exams through this late summer, fall period. So one exams, you can't take one exams, and then also take the exam in California on October 5th and 6th. Because a lot of jurisdictions have said that, and that seems real. What seems strange is California seems very concerned with potential for cheating if you sit more than one, which is raising some questions as to how that would work, because California the only piece that they use that anyone else uses is the MBE. And so are there going to be the same or similar MBE questions used on a September exam as in the October exams? Like, what do you think?
Well, I'm going where only the foolish tread. I think what it says to me is that the NCBE probably has told the bar examiners that they intend to repeat not necessarily full sets of 100 questions, but they're going to be the same questions shuffled around between all these exams. Remember that the NCBE typically only has to do 400 questions a year in a normal 12-month year. This year they did 200 questions in February of 2020, and then they had to do the July 2020 exams. They had to do the September 9th exams, the September 30th exams, and now the October 5th exams. I have a sneaking suspicion the NCBE doesn't have enough questions. And as that became clearer to them that they did not have enough questions, they started saying to the bar examiners, we may reuse questions. And because California is really, really concerned, as you said, Megan, I think California is now saying what the quiet part out loud, which is, we're worried that people will go in and sit for these exams in July, September 9th, and September 30th and share that information. So here's what's happened, and I'm being 100% transparent here. We have not asked any of our July students to tell us what was on the bar exam. I do not know what was on the bar exam. I know some of you think that but I do not know. It's part of my license agreement. I can't know, okay? In addition to that, while it was tempting to say, I could stay at home here, take some bar exams from home this season, I'm not allowed to do that. Under the terms of my license with the bar exam, they do not want ringers like me in the test. They don't want ringers like Megan in the test. I mean, she went through and took her past the bar. I took past the bar. We got one shot, one, that was it. And then we were done. And for me, that one was, so the reality is that what I think California is saying is we don't want bar reviews or people that create pop-up companies or claim to have questions come in, take the exam, and then suddenly start giving those questions and answers away to people. And I'm pointing this out only because, again, it's going to be noise and a distraction. If you're on a Reddit thread, if you're in Facebook groups, I know that there are a gazillion California Facebook groups out there about the bar exam. And I know that there are going to be people, we've had people try and bomb into our group and say, I've got information. Well, if we kick you out, you're gone. But I don't think everybody is quite as frank about this stuff. And so there are going to be people out there trying to do that. Having said that, I know what we felt in Florida was students saying, well, this isn't fair. It's not a level playing field again. And that's true. It is very possible that there will be people out there who have been through these bar exams who will start trying to, in some way, monetize what they've done. And that's not fair. If somebody gets caught doing it, that's the end of their legal career. But I don't think that'll stop some people. And so I think you have to decide that you're going to go in and take the exam from you're asked to become a member of an ethical profession, and you got to treat it that way. And when we went to California with the exam topics being released early, it created the same kind of discomfort. I don't think there's an answer that's going to be solvable here, but I just thought it was really interesting that California sort of jumped out and said, don't do this. If you're not, what do they call it, a bona fide taker?
Yeah, bona fide. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really that direct shot across the bow at some of these people that are trying to monetize having taken the bar exam. So be very cautious about that stuff. Please stay as far away from that. If you're in a group that's doing that, get out of that group right away. It has to destroy your legal career.
All right. And so one final update about states. We have an entrant to the UBE Kentucky is going to join the UBE beginning February 2021 with a pass score of 266. So that's one more jurisdiction that under normal circumstances will you'll be use that UB score freely within go from Kentucky to other UBE states.
Of their optimism. I mean, all these states trying to figure out if they still want to stay in the UBE, and here's one coming in. Of course, Texas is the other big state that comes into the UBE in 2021. So clearly seeing a seismic shift of, where restrictions are going and what they're going to do. I would see Kentucky make this move, but maybe I don't know that they'll be the last state to come into the UBE. It's just interesting to watch.
Definitely. All right. So let's after postponing the exam, I began reading and hearing that because ILG software failed, there arose the possibility that Florida would have to mirror other states, including administering the exam in open book format. I sent a letter to the bar examiner stating that if this occurred, I would hope that going forward, future exams would be given with the same leniency. Their response to that was to put me back in the group to take the next exam. I did not ask for that. Regardless, is roughly 60 days enough using your materials to prepare for an open book exam? I'm not asking for a guarantee, just your...
There's no guarantee it's going to be an open book exam, so don't make a decision based on that. Secondly, 60 days is plenty of time to prepare for any of the exams. You basically want to figure about 250 hours to prepare for any of these tests, so about 4 hours a day. So if you've got 4 hours a day on average, then I think you're going to be okay from that standpoint. Third is, don't offer your opinions to the bar examiners. They could care less what you think. And their reaction, I think, is just about right. You don't like it? Tough, we'll move this exam. This is not a level playing field. They really don't care what you think. And I know that's very frustrating to people and feels like it's not the way you treated, but welcome to the world of bar exam privilege. You have none as an applicant. So, accept be grateful for whatever, fortunately. So I think that's really the reality. But if you wanted to take the October exam in Florida, you're able to do it. Absolutely. I'm not sure they'd let you back in, to be honest. Now that they've moved you to February, move you back into October. We saw that around the August exam. They weren't letting people back in unless they originally had a ticket for July exam. So I don't know. It's worth asking them if you want to get into the exam, but you do need to ask. So just with all these things related to Florida, as we've talked about today, just stay alert, stay aware of what's going on. There will be lots more information obviously coming out. I think the examiners in Florida have to catch their breath as well, figure out what they're going to do, and then they'll start making some announcements, and we'll obviously keep you informed as we get that information from them. And then take a little break here. As Megan said, this is a marathon. It's now an extended marathon. And I think you're going to need your energy for that push into October. Mm-hmm. And depending on whether we're talking early October, mid-October, late October, that could be a significant difference. Just
Great. Oh, big deep breaths.
Precedented week. We will be back next week. Bye, guys. Again, I want to just remind all of you that if you're trying to figure out what your strategy ought to be for 2021, figuring out whether or not you should sit on the sidelines or actually jump in and take the exam, or even what exam to take, we want to encourage you to come and attend our free training webinar. Now is the best time to take the bar exam. You can register right here in the show notes or go to celebrationbarreview.com/now. We'll hope to see you on that webinar. Remember, I'll do a live 15-minute Q&A at the end of each session to update you and bring you any information and answer your questions about specific jurisdictions. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Hang in there. We'll see you all next week along the Extra Mile.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.